Ivy and Eliza Monroe were sisters by blood but rivals by nature. When Caleb Mercer moved in next door, their obsession with winning his attention ignited a twisted competition that spiraled into betrayal, madness, and a murder that shattered the peace of Willow Creek forever. In the peaceful suburb of Willow Creek, the days passed slowly, and life rarely offered surprises. It was the kind of place where neighbors waved from their driveways, dogs barked from behind picket fences, and kids rode bicycles in looping circles until sunset. Most families had lived there for years, making change a rare and unsettling event. But everything shifted on a bright Monday afternoon when a moving truck pulled into the old Henderson property at the far end of Pine Street. For weeks, the house had sat empty, its lawn overgrown and mailbox stuffed with flyers. When the truck arrived and the doors swung open, curiosity spread like wildfire. Out stepped Caleb Mercer, a man in his late 20s with a quiet charm that immediately drew attention. He was tall, well-groomed, and dressed casually in a gray t-shirt and jeans. Something about him seemed effortless, the kind of person who didn't have to try hard to be noticed. In a neighborhood where excitement usually came in the form of a garage sale or a lost cat, Caleb's arrival was a jolt to the routine. From the very beginning, two sisters who lived next door, Ivy and Eliza Monroe, took special interest in him. Ivy, the elder by 3 years, was calm and calculated. She ran a trendy boutique downtown and had a reputation for being organized and socially polished. She liked things neat, quiet, and under control. Eliza, on the other hand, was unpredictable and fiery. She worked as a part-time barista and was often described by neighbors as the wild one. Where Ivy was perfection, Eliza was passion, though different in every way. The sisters had grown up close, sharing a room, clothes, and eventually even secrets. But they also shared a subtle rivalry, one that had always simmered beneath the surface and occasionally boiled over during family holidays or local events. The arrival of a new, attractive neighbor reignited that competition in a way no one could have predicted. At first, it was innocent. Ivy offered Caleb a welcome basket filled with homemade scones and a handwritten note. Eliza countered the next day with a box of donuts and a casual invitation to show him around town. Each encounter was reported and dissected between the sisters in passive-aggressive silence. They began changing their routines. Ivy started jogging in the mornings, often coincidentally passing Caleb's driveway. Eliza began sunbathing in the backyard, angling her chair just enough so he could see her from his kitchen window. Neighbors noticed. At block parties and casual chats on the sidewalk, whispers began to circulate. The Monroe sisters, once inseparable, were now barely speaking. They rarely made eye contact. Their friendly competition had evolved into something far more unsettling. Caleb, for his part, remained mostly distant. He was polite, always quick with a smile or wave, but never lingered long in conversation. He was often seen working in his garage or going for late-night walks with headphones in. That didn't stop Ivy or Eliza from pushing harder, each convinced the other was ruining her chances. Ivy began spreading small rumors, suggesting Eliza was unstable and too intense. Eliza responded in her own way, following Ivy, snooping through her things, and making cryptic comments to mutual friends. The Monroe household, once warm and welcoming, turned cold. Meals were eaten in silence. Doors were slammed. There were arguments late at night that carried through the walls. And still, both sisters clung to the idea that Caleb might one day choose one of them. They weren't just fighting over a neighbor. They were fighting for validation, control, and perhaps, unknowingly, a dangerous sense of victory over one another. What started with scones and small talk would soon spiral into something far darker, something Willow Creek would never forget. The change in the Monroe sisters became more pronounced as the weeks passed. Ivy no longer smiled in the mornings, her once perfect routines now tinged with unease. She began returning home later than usual, her eyes shadowed, her steps tense. Eliza stopped showing up to her job altogether. She spent hours in her room, with the curtains drawn, only emerging when she knew Ivy was away. What had begun as playful competition had morphed into something bitter and silent. They barely spoke. When they did, it was clipped, sharp, or completely laced with sarcasm. The house felt divided, not just in mood but in territory. Ivy claimed the front garden. Eliza stayed mostly in the backyard. It was an invisible war line between them, and both knew exactly where it was drawn. Outside the home, their behavior changed too. Ivy became obsessed with appearances. She started dressing more carefully, wearing perfume just to water the plants, always hoping Caleb would notice. She casually dropped into conversations at the local market about her new neighbor, carefully, implying a budding connection. Eliza, meanwhile, went the opposite route. She grew bolder, more impulsive. She left notes on Caleb's car. She started bringing him coffee in the mornings, leaving it at his door with flirty messages. At night, neighbors sometimes spotted her sitting in her car, engine off, staring at the lights in Caleb's living room. She didn't hide her interest anymore. She wore it like armor. What neither sister understood was that Caleb had little intention of getting involved with either of them. He kept his distance. He was polite, always kind, but never invited interaction beyond small talk. He didn't respond to the notes, didn't eat the baked goods, didn't encourage the attention. But to Ivy and Eliza, his silence became something else, a challenge, a mystery to solve. And in their minds, each believed she was getting closer. The situation grew tenser. Ivy began tracking Eliza's movements. She noticed every time her sister left the house and when she returned. She wrote things down in a notebook she kept in her bedside drawer. Eliza found it once and tore out several pages in a rage, but said nothing. Instead, she retaliated by sneaking into Ivy's room and going through her phone, reading messages, looking at call logs. She found nothing, but it didn't stop her from searching again and again. Both sisters were slipping deeper into obsession, their focus entirely on each other, using Caleb as the excuse but losing grip on reality in the process. They began interfering in each other's plans. Ivy deleted messages from Eliza's phone when she left it unattended. Eliza moved Ivy's belongings around, hiding her shoes or tossing her mail. Small acts, easily overlooked, but intended to cause disruption. Neither trusted the other. Their mutual paranoia created a dangerous loop of suspicion and manipulation. And yet, neither would stop. Pride, jealousy, and an unspoken fear of losing to the other kept them locked in. Then came a turning point. One night, a neighbor walking their dog saw Eliza standing outside Caleb's house just past midnight. She wasn't moving, just staring at his front window. The next day, Caleb's garbage can was found tipped over, its contents scattered, as if someone had searched through it. No one said anything publicly, but people started talking. Something about the Monroe sisters no longer seemed harmless. Something about Caleb's quiet lifestyle now seemed unsettling. The tension reached its peak when Ivy was seen at the pharmacy, purchasing sleeping pills and vodka. When asked about it later, she claimed it was for stress. But rumors spread fast. And yet, it all still seemed like high-strung behavior, the type of drama that occasionally flared up in any neighborhood. No one imagined it would lead to violence. No one suspected that Caleb, the man they barely knew, would soon disappear without a trace. The first sign something was wrong came when Caleb failed to show up for work on a Tuesday morning. He was known for being punctual, reliable, and quiet. He never missed a shift at the local architecture firm where he had recently transferred. When his boss called and got no answer, concern turned quickly into alarm. Multiple calls went unanswered. By the end of the day, the police were contacted and a welfare check was requested. Officers arrived at Caleb's house that evening. The door was locked from the inside. His car sat untouched in the driveway. Nothing appeared broken or disturbed. Through the front window, a half-drunk cup of coffee still sat on the kitchen counter, and his wallet and keys were found inside on the hall table. His phone was plugged in next to his bed. The only thing missing was him. The news of Caleb's disappearance spread through Willow Creek with eerie speed. No one in the neighborhood could recall anything strange that night. No loud noises, no shouting, no visitors. Just a silent, warm evening like any other. But the absence of answers only made the situation more chilling. He had vanished in the middle of an ordinary night. Without explanation, detectives canvassed the area. Most neighbors had nothing useful to offer. A few mentioned seeing him jogging that weekend. Others noted his routine walks, his quiet demeanor. But one comment stood out. A neighbor 3 houses down said they'd noticed Eliza's car parked near Caleb's place late at night several times in the past 2 weeks. Another neighbor remembered Ivy standing at her window long after midnight, unmoving, watching the street. Both sisters were questioned. Ivy appeared calm, composed, and offered her full cooperation. She expressed concern, called the situation shocking, and claimed she hadn't seen Caleb in over a week. Eliza was more agitated. She admitted to speaking with Caleb once or twice, but denied any recent interaction. She seemed flustered, shifting in her seat, avoiding eye contact. Her responses were short, uncertain. To the detectives, it was clear the sisters were hiding something. The investigation deepened. Officers reviewed doorbell camera footage from houses on the street. One clip, captured from a porch 2 homes down, showed a blurry figure entering Caleb's backyard around 11:40 p.m. on the night he disappeared. The footage was grainy, and the figure moved quickly, but something about the gait seemed familiar to investigators. Though no face could be seen, it was enough to raise suspicions. The search expanded to Caleb's property. Nothing inside the house suggested a struggle or break-in. But outside, something caught the attention of a cadaver dog brought in by the forensic team. In the backyard, near the fence line, a flower bed had recently been disturbed. Fresh soil was unevenly spread, and a strong odor lingered beneath the surface. Investigators began digging. Just a few feet below the surface, they discovered a large plastic tarp wrapped tightly around a body. It was Caleb. His hands were bruised, and his neck bore deep marks consistent with strangulation. There were scratches on his arms and face, suggesting he had fought back. His expression, even in death, showed fear. The discovery sent a shockwave through Willow Creek. What had seemed like a quiet disappearance was now confirmed as murder. Detectives returned to the Monroe sisters with urgency. This time, they weren't just asking questions. They had evidence. A fingerprint was found on the tarp, Eliza's. But complicating things further, clutched tightly in Caleb's left hand, was a silver necklace that had belonged to Ivy. Both women were arrested. Ivy was silent. Eliza wept. Each pointed the finger at the other, offering conflicting accounts. What had once been sibling rivalry had turned into something far more disturbing. And for investigators, the challenge was just beginning. Because buried beneath Caleb's body was something else, a single red rose, freshly cut, placed there with care. The investigation into Caleb's murder took a darker turn as forensic teams processed the scene. The rose found buried beneath his body wasn't just a detail, it became a focal point. Detectives theorized it had been placed there intentionally, possibly as a symbol or a message. But from whom and why remained unanswered. The flower was fresh, its stems still green, and matched roses growing in the front yard of the Monroe house. That led police straight back to Ivy and Eliza, who were both still in custody, awaiting charges as the evidence was reviewed. Inside the Monroe home, detectives carried out a thorough search. Ivy's bedroom was spotless, everything neatly arranged. But in her nightstand drawer, wrapped in tissue paper, was Caleb's watch. She had never mentioned having it, nor could she explain how it ended up there. She claimed she found it on her front lawn and meant to return it. Investigators didn't buy the story. In the closet, tucked behind a stack of sweaters, they also found a box of unused rose petals and ribbons, the same style used in the boutique Ivy managed. When asked about them, she offered no clear answers that Eliza's room painted a different picture. Chaotic, messy, unorganized. Clothes littered the floor, and old coffee cups sat on her desk. But what the detectives cared about was her phone. Forensic specialists retrieved deleted searches from the browser, phrases like, "How deep to bury a body," "How to remove fingerprints from plastic," and "How long does it take for a person to decompose?" The timestamps aligned with the night Caleb vanished. Along with that, a screenshot was found in her gallery, a photo of Caleb sitting on his porch, taken from a distance. The photo had been taken just 2 days before his death. Both sisters continued to blame each other. Ivy insisted Eliza was obsessed, unstable, and had a violent temper. Eliza claimed Ivy was manipulative, cold, and capable of planning the murder without remorse. Each seemed to believe their version of the truth. But for investigators, the facts were all tangled. Ivy's fingerprints weren't found on the tarp, but her necklace had been clenched in Caleb's hand. Eliza's fingerprint was on the tarp, but there was no physical evidence placing her inside Caleb's home. No DNA, no blood, nothing conclusive. The small suburban community was captivated by the case. Media vans began lining the street. Reporters knocked on neighbors' doors, collecting quotes, speculating motives. Some residents took Ivy's side, recalling how responsible she always appeared. Others pointed to Eliza's erratic behavior and public outbursts. But no one could say for sure who had done it, or if they had done it together. The prosecutor's office struggled. There was enough to suggest both sisters were involved, but not enough to determine who had actually committed the murder. Was it a joint effort, or had one lured the other into helping cover it up? If Eliza had killed Caleb, why would Ivy bury him with a rose? If Ivy had done it, why would Eliza leave behind incriminating internet searches? The contradictions were endless. Then a new development shifted everything. An anonymous envelope arrived at the Willow Creek Police Department. Inside was a typed letter with no signature and no return address. The letter explained, in chilling detail, what had happened the night Caleb died. The writer claimed to have witnessed the entire thing, from luring Caleb into the backyard, to the argument, to the moment of violence, and the hasty burial. The details were too precise to ignore. The letter matched facts that hadn't been released to the public. Detectives rushed to test the envelope for prints or DNA, hoping for a lead. They got one. The DNA matched someone unexpected, not Ivy, not Eliza, but their mother, Margaret Monroe. Margaret had said very little during the investigation, claiming she didn't know what her daughters were involved in. But now, it seemed she had known everything. Her guilt had finally forced her hand, and the truth, at least part of it, was finally coming to light. Margaret Monroe had always kept a low profile. In Willow Creek, she was known as a quiet woman, polite but distant, often seen tending to her flower beds or reading on her porch. She had raised Ivy and Eliza mostly alone after their father left years earlier. Many believed she had done a good job, raising two strong, independent daughters. But beneath her calm demeanor was a woman who had spent her life holding things together with silence and denial. The letter she sent to the police changed everything. When confronted, Margaret admitted to writing the anonymous note. She claimed it had become too much to bear, the weight of what she knew, the fear of what her daughters had done. She said she didn't come forward earlier because she hoped it would somehow resolve itself. But when Caleb's body was found and both her daughters were arrested, the guilt consumed her. She felt she owed it to Caleb's family to speak.in. The letter, Margaret explained how she had heard the argument from her bedroom window the night Caleb died. She wrote that Eliza had lured Caleb into the backyard, using a vague excuse to talk. She wanted to confess her feelings, and when Caleb tried to leave, rejecting her gently but firmly, she snapped. According to Margaret, Eliza struck him with a garden tool, something heavy and sharp. Ivy saw the commotion from the upstairs hallway and ran outside. By the time she arrived, Caleb was lying on the ground, gasping for air. Ivy screamed at Eliza, but then something shifted. Ivy, afraid of what this would do to their family's reputation, told her sister they had to fix it, not report it. Margaret had watched the rest unfold through the window. The two sisters worked silently, digging a shallow grave near the rose bushes. Ivy wrapped the body in a plastic tarp. Eliza brought the tarp from the garage. They covered the grave in soil, then smoothed it over. Ivy picked a rose from the front yard and gently placed it under Caleb's shoulder before sealing the grave completely. Margaret saw it all, but didn't stop them. She couldn't move. She froze, paralyzed by a fear so deep it turned her into a bystander in her own family's unraveling. After confessing, Margaret was not charged. Prosecutors considered her a witness, though many felt she bore responsibility for remaining silent. Her testimony, however, helped prosecutors build their case. The evidence was now clearer. Eliza had struck the fatal blow. Ivy had helped conceal the crime. It wasn't a coordinated murder. It was an emotional explosion, followed by panic and desperate decisions. In court, Eliza was charged with second-degree murder. Her defense argued diminished capacity due to mental instability and obsession. Ivy was charged with being an accessory after the fact and interfering with an investigation. Both received prison sentences, though Ivy's was significantly shorter. During sentencing, the courtroom was silent. Caleb's family sat in the front row, holding a framed photo of him smiling, unaware of what awaited him in that quiet neighborhood. The Monroe home was put up for sale within months. Margaret moved away, leaving no forwarding address. Neighbors whispered about the case for years afterward. Some swore they had always felt something strange about the sisters. Others felt sorry for them, believing the tragedy was the result of deep-seated emotional wounds never healed.